This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.
That's all part of this psychological warfare. If people that are waking up can't stand the fake news and they want to fight against all this corruption, it's up to all of us to keep each other in check and make sure that things are being fact-checked before circulating it around and creating more confusion, because all we're doing is feeding their agenda.
Welcome to America Daily. I'm Jessica Beatty. In the age of fake news, it can be hard to figure out what is based in fact and what's a false narrative. It's created a lot of confusion, and that makes it difficult for people to make informed decisions. Today's guest is an investigative journalist who is dedicated to the truth and to uncovering deep webs of corruption. She always cites sources with links so you can see for yourself and come to your own conclusions. Today we discuss cognitive dissonance, how to keep positive, and most importantly, how we all can stay vigilant against spreading false information. Here's my conversation with Cory Lynn from Cory's Digs. Thanks so much for joining us, Cory. First of all, could you tell us a little about your website?
Sure. This is Cory Lynn with Cory's Digs. My website is corysdigs.com. It's CORYSDIGS.com. And you can find me on Twitter as well. I do deep investigative reporting on corruption and big webs and nests. My reports usually take me 50 to 100 hours to do because I connect a lot of dots, a lot of players. I create timelines and maps. And then I also provide a lot of resources on my site so that if people want to do their own digging or fact check, I have tons of resources on here and background search database and tools. And I even have a couple of articles kind of teaching people how to work through the process of digging into something.
When and why did you decide to start it?
Well, I believe I jumped back on Twitter. I had an account previously, but I jumped back on in 2016 because I've been feeling this shift coming for a long time. And I like to open people's eyes and wake them up to truth. And I'm really good at research. So I decided this was the time when I saw that Trump was elected. This was the time that this shift was going to happen. And so I built the website and I just started digging away and putting out as much information as I can. And I cite all of my sources. So I'm really anal about keeping things incredibly fact-based. It's bothered me my whole life seeing people manipulated and taken advantage of or lied to. Those are just huge pet peeves of mine. I mean, no one likes that, but it's something that really, really grates me. I don't know if I was a judge in a past life or what, but it really, really bothers me. And I do not like seeing children harmed. So I covered a lot on child trafficking and the pedophiles as well. So I kind of cover the gamut on the politicians and some agendas that they're all working towards, the big foundations, the child trafficking, drug trafficking. And I just want to wake people up so they can make smart decisions moving forward. So they at least have facts to work from instead of all the propaganda being pushed out there by the media and the majority of politicians.
There's this phenomenon called cognitive dissonance, and it's something you've written about. It really ties into the psychological warfare and the fake news. So could you explain what cognitive dissonance is?
Yeah, so basically it's when they're trying to create such a level of confusion that people go into identity crisis. They don't know what to believe anymore. It's a state of just mass confusion. And they're doing a really good job at it. And by they, I mean the MSM and Hollywood and politicians. They've all pretty much controlled the narrative for a long time. And now that narrative is, people are fighting back because they know that they've been lied to about a ton of things. So I would say right now, circulating around, we have about 85% of everything you see out there is BS, and about 15% is facts, truth backed with facts. People need to slow their roll. And instead of seeing a headline and just tweeting it out, read the full article. So here's the thing. A lot of people are contributing to this. It's not just those that are putting out the projection and the manipulation and the lies. It's those that are sharing information and stating it as fact and truth when it's really just a theory, or there's really no theory to it at all. It's complete conjecture. People need to slow down and pay attention to that because they're contributing to the cognitive dissonance. They are contributing to all this confusion. Every time someone dies, they are not arc-incited. That one drives me nuts. And I cover that in here. People keep calling Hillary Clinton her clone and that she actually is dead. Okay, if that's your theory, state it as a theory. Don't state it as a fact. Same thing with Ginsburg and Soros. There are people that say, oh, they've been dead and that's why we don't see them and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, but I don't know if people understand the level of confusion this creates because everyone's waking up at, different times. Some people are just starting to wake up. Some people have been woke for decades. So when you have someone coming in and trying to discern what is truth and what's not, and you've got all these people saying, they were murdered, they were arc-incited, they were murdered by the Clintons, and then someone says, oh my God, are you serious? And then you've got these parody accounts. People need to pay attention to these parody accounts because there was one just about a week or two ago on Ginsburg, in fact, saying that she had a massive stroke and she was rushed to the hospital, and everyone starts tweeting this as fact. What happens is you get a group of people that all of a sudden realize it's a parody account and they apologize and say, oh, I'm sorry, this was a parody account. But then you got people who've already told friends, coworkers, family, they've shared it on Facebook and other platforms. Well, now they're too embarrassed. So they just drop it and move on. And so this information sits out there. You got chunks of people thinking this is legitimate, other people thinking it's not. And that's just one example. There's thousands of bytes of information flowing every day. I see people say, I haven't looked into this yet, but if this is true, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, that's a good way to word it. That's great. But then the other people pick it up and they start putting it out there and going, oh my God, look at this, as though it's fact. So I really encourage people to slow down, read things thoroughly before you make a statement about them, and try not to react so much from emotion. I mean, I know there's going to be emotion involved, but try to just take a few deep breaths before you actually, jump the gun, because it's just making things more confusing for people. That's like all part of this psychological warfare. That is part of their destabilization agenda, fragmenting and dividing and creating confusion and gender identity. That's like all part of this psychological warfare. And if people that are waking up can't stand the fake news and they want to fight against all this corruption, it's up to all of us to keep each other in check and make sure that things are being fact-checked before circulating it around and creating more confusion, because all we're doing is feeding their agenda. So it's really important. I did an article called Normalization, Indoctrination, and Degenderization is Sweeping the Nation. And I have some really good short videos in there as well, if people want to get more insight into this psychological warfare game being played.
I was wondering if you could give any specific examples of how the mainstream media has been using these techniques to manipulate the mass consciousness or narrative of things. I was thinking the Russia collusion hoax would be one, but I wanted to get your take.
Well, it's all propagation. Look, they get their talking points in the morning and they all say the same things. If you sit and you compare news stations, even in different states, they will say the same sentences or use the same phrases. That is with purpose and intention. You hear the same thing over and over and over again, and some people will start to believe it, or they feel beaten down, they're tired, and they just throw in the towel. I think racism is a great example. They're using the hell out of that right now. There could be a criminal who just robbed a bank, and you could say, wow, this person's terrible. They just went in and they knocked over this old woman and then they jumped the counter and they robbed $5 million from this bank. And next thing you know, if that person's Hispanic or African American, well, you are racist. You are just attacking them and going after them because they're not white. This is how they spin stuff. They're hitting it hard right now. And I think a lot of people are seeing through it. It's so old. I'm like so sick of seeing it and hearing it. And, they create the Islamophobe and homophobe and xenophobe and you're a bigot and a racist. And this is all projection tactics to keep seeding the minds, try to make them believe that someone is a certain way. Like they do this with Donald Trump all the time. And now they say that his supporters are all racist as well. Meanwhile, CNN puts Antifa up on a pedestal like they're a wonderful group of folks. So, it's so transparent to me. I'm sure it's transparent to you and many others, but I'd say the bulk of this country, it's not transparent to because people are just not paying enough attention or, they're very busy with their lives. So they suddenly hear one little blip of news. God forbid if it comes from CNN, MSNBC, it's most likely going to be 98% inaccurate or blatant lies. They create falsehoods all the time. The whole Russia hoax is way too long to get into right now. But, like the border, perfect example. They started out by saying, oh, it's a manufactured crisis. Trump is making all this up. It's not a crisis. And then and then they flip that and go, oh my God, they're all in cages, but really they're photos from when Obama was in. And then they flip it and go back to it's manufactured. Now it's, oh my God, people are dying and we need to do something. And it just on and on. They constantly go through their list of narratives to try to convince people that they're the good guys when they are the devil in disguise. And it should be obvious. It should be obvious to people by now, but unfortunately it's not to some.
Definitely. And with a lot of these divisive topics in the news, it's all about emotion. It's so powerful. I feel like if you have a really strong emotional reaction to something right away, you should take a step back and think a little more about what just happened and whether you've been programmed to react that way. I think it's gotten so confusing now that people just don't want to deal with it because it's too much work to figure out.
And if people would get back to, or start, if they weren't there in the first place, but really getting in tune with themselves and their intuition and their gut instincts, everything will become much more obvious. Not enough people tap into that. People's intuition is a lot stronger than I think people give themselves credit for, and they really need to start paying attention to that. And I'm going to be writing more articles on that in the future because it's really not as confusing as it might look or feel. I think people are trying to take in cliff notes instead of spending time on a single article, a single report, a single video. They're trying to digest 200 cliff notes, and that's not going to work. That's just going to create a bunch of garble in your brain,
Could you give us any tips for how people can learn to discern what's true and what's fake and avoid spreading false information?
I wish people would slow down. Slow down just a little bit. I know stuff's flying at us at rapid pace right now. Do not retweet a headline until you've actually read the article, or double check to make sure it's not a parody account. If you have a theory on something, state it's a theory, or you haven't fact checked this. Don't just make a blatant serious statement or accusation about something without backing it with facts. Pedo symbols, that's another big one. People will screenshot someone's earrings or their necklace where it has a little swirl, and it could be like a Southwest Cocopelli style or something. And that person may have no frigging clue that pedophiles use these symbols. You see jewelry like this and, you could go to your local freaking Kohl's or Macy's or JCPenney or whatever, and it's all out there. Or they'll screenshot someone's clothing because it has a swirl pattern on it. People make assumptions and jump to conclusions. So I'm saying before declaring someone as a pedophile, because that's a pretty serious accusation and you could destroy someone's reputation, even if that person is nefarious and caught up with some bad people or committed wire fraud or some sort of level of corruption, you can't just jump from point A to point Z without doing further digging and backing it with more evidence before just automatically making that assumption. That is creating a lot of cognitive dissonance for people. The whole assumption game is dangerous. Try to remain somewhat objective. Try not to react too quickly from an emotional state. I see memes going around where people quote people. It's one thing if you're quoting Einstein and it's a quote that everyone's familiar with. But if you're going to quote what some politician said 5 years ago or something, or some billionaire or elitist quoted 2 years ago, I highly recommend pulling the link to that quote and including it when you send that meme out, or at least fact checking it and making sure that that quote was really said. Because I can't tell you how many times I've looked up some of these quotes from memes and there's absolutely no proof they were ever said. So memes are great. I love memes, but those need to be fact checked as well. And don't buy into fear porn. There's a lot of that going around where people all of a sudden panic and jump to conclusions and go, oh no, these are the black hats. They need to just relax and take a deep breath and ride things out for a couple days and see how things are going to unravel, because that doesn't do anyone any good, especially the person stressing and panicking over it. It just creates more panic, We don't want to spread more fear, more panic, more confusion. We're trying to work against that because that's their agenda to instill in everyone. And we need to stop that.
That's another thing I like about your work. You end on a positive note no matter how dark the topic.
Right. Yeah. And balance is key. Something I'm not terribly great at, but balance is key. As far as, try not to get caught up in this darkness for so many hours that you don't have a life, or you don't spend time out in nature, or you don't, friends and family, and do some things that you enjoy, because there's a lot of dark stuff coming out and a lot more is going to be coming out. It's heavy stuff.
Again, you can find Cory's work at corysdigs.com, COREYSDIGS.com, and join us tomorrow to hear the rest of our interview with Cory Lynn. We'll discuss her eye-opening 6-part series on eugenics, infertility, and the population growth crisis. Stay tuned for that. Once again, I'm Jessica Beatty. Thanks for listening to America Daily.
This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.